landscape projects, I think they were called back then, in about 2000, and then set up Dialogue Matters to start, where I've done both land and sea stuff in about 20 different countries. And this is one example. So this is some work we did last year. It's Jersey. I haven't got a map of where Jersey is. I didn't realise it would be such an international audience. But Jersey is a UK Crown dependency, which means it sort of governs itself, but it has strong links to the UK. And it's down near the northern coast of Brittany and France. I think that's probably as best as I can say it without a map. And this, the green area, it's a small island. It's about 12 miles, I think, by about 8, depending how you measure the intertidal, which is immense because they have a very big tidal range. So depending how big you think the island is, depending whether you measure it above low tide or below. So it's the green areas are the bits that became a coastal national park. And the history of this was that the minister decided that they needed a coastal national park at rather short notice in 2009, a couple of months before their island plan, which was going to last 10 to 15 years, came into being. We whizzed over and did some workshops and helped stakeholders, key stakeholders, discuss the concept, and there was sufficient support for it to be put in the island plan. However, very little happened after that. So they ended up with enhanced planning controls. They did a detailed landscape assessment that ended up in a much more detailed and defined boundary. But virtually nobody was aware they'd even got a coastal national park. It wasn't integrating management. It really wasn't doing very much at all. So we were over there doing some water management work and spoke to the director and said, come on, what's going on with this national park? And then were commissioned to design a process, a participation process, to develop the management plan, and that's due to be completed sort of any time now, with a launch any time now as well. But at our very initial meeting, the steering group, who comprised government departments, so that was water, transport, tourism, all the main government departments, because it's government and everybody else there, there's no sort of agencies or something, it's too small a place. So they came together and we said, okay, if this was successful, what does that look like? And these are direct quotes of what they said. So it would generate co-delivery and action, it would result in change, it would build consensus around principles and actions, it would be action focused, it would create synergies of effort, and it would result in increased and shared ownership. And for many, many years we've known about an approach, or an ethos if you like, called co-production, but never been able to deliver it because as independent consultants we're very trapped by the specifications that people write that commission the work that we do, and we often push those boundaries as best we can, but we're still tied by the specification and what we've got to account for and the number of days that have been issued in the contract and so on. And I said, well, this stuff, what you're saying here sounds something like co-production. And they said, well, we don't really know what you're talking about. So I explained. So this is our definition. It is a contested term. Academics can mean it quite differently to practitioners. But this is the one we came up with, which is a reciprocal relationship, so quite equitable relationship between citizens, the third sector, and public bodies, which draws on the resources of each. So that could be time, effort, energy, information, know-how, innovation, skills, and funds, to share in the design, the development, and the delivery of agreed actions to result in shared benefits. But that still doesn't really pick out, well, why is it different to a lot of what's going on anyway? And it's this two-way matrix, which up here you've got responsibility. Who's got responsibility for planning and designing what happens? And you've got the options of it being users and communities on the right, professionals doing it with users and communities, or just professionals by themselves. And most of the work we've ever been contracted to do sits here. So it's participation, it can be different levels of influence that the stakeholders have when they are participating, from information giving through to fully shared decision making. And the best we've done is fully shared decision making, full consensus building. So what comes out of the workshops is the decision that will happen. It is not going to a separate decision making group or a board or anybody else who can veto it. And that would be the best practice we've been able to deliver to now. But then you hit well, who's responsible actually for delivering it and governance of what happens? And all the projects we've been involved in have defaulted back to a steering group. of what I might call the usual suspects. So in England, that would be the agencies, Natural England, Environment Agency, maybe a Wildlife Trust, maybe RSPB, maybe a local authority. So they are professional environmentalists and conservationists who then are the steering group for the implementation and the governance of what happens. And all the other stakeholders have been involved up into that time. They're not sharing any resources. They may be involved in individual small projects. They're the recipients of newsletters. But a massive asset has been lost. And co-production, full co-production, is where you co-agree, you co-produce the management plan itself, and then you co-govern. So you share delivery, you share your assets, you share the governance. So another way of looking at it is that on this diagram, on the left-hand side, you've got who's got high levels of responsibility and power to decide and to deliver. And if it's all public bodies, or at the other end, it would be all the others, whoever the others are. And of course, co-production is trying to do something which is harnessing the best of all of that. And if you get it right, then you end up with real opportunities identified, real issues addressed, people learn from each other, you get decisions much better informed from multiple perspectives. You get integrated action across interests and sectors. Well, I think you can get a lot of that with just the participation default to an expert governance group. But what you don't get so much is multiple assets harnessed for delivery, nor so much commitment to implementation. I think that's the additional benefit that co-production as an ethos can bring. So this, as far as we know, where has not been done for the management of a protected area in the UK before. I've spoken to some colleagues, and I used to be a commissioner, I've spoken to some people in that. And as far as I'm aware, not in Europe either, but I could be wrong. So we had a very tight budget to do this in. We had a 6-month time frame from identifying stakeholders through to agreed content of an action plan. We had, it was a decision-making dialogue with a sequence of 3 workshops, and we included 45 stakeholders in that process. Underlined is business, because business is not usually involved in some of these activities, but the Chamber of Commerce was, head of the quarry, head of the airport, so some of the economic sort of movers and shakers on the island were involved. And we also took this thing called an asset-based approach, and obviously we don't have time to go into that, other than to say most management action in the environment takes a problem or a deficit-focused approach. So what's not working and how do we fix it? We now typically, and have done for the last 5 or 6 years, and all the processes we've designed, take an asset-based approach, which is what's working and taking you in the right direction, and how could you do more of that and add to that and strengthen that and complement that. And that radically changes the psychology and attitude of the group. I have no evidence for that other than my observation and experience over multiple workshops. But you can just see people's attitude. Instead of, oh, it's all really difficult, it's overwhelming, it's a problem, it's, well, we're doing this, we're doing this, and we're doing this, well, we could do more then. It completely changes the way people tackle some often very difficult, intractable problems. So, what did we get as a result of this process? We got, this was extraordinary to us. We asked people at the first workshop and to confirm at the last workshop what resources they would offer for implementation of a management plan. And we got 50 specific offers, and some of that was about volunteers or sharing data or sharing skills or wanting to lead new innovations. Lots of the business people stepped forward and said, well, we know about leadership and marshalling resources and making stuff happen, so we're up for that. Most excitingly, from a conservation point of view, I think, and a funding point of view, some people came forward and said, we will put a % of our profits to this. And when we initially looked at the identification of the person who'd offered that, we actually thought it was a small beach hut owner who'd come in as a representative of that kind of interest. And we thought, well, isn't that fantastic that somebody's willing to put their hand in a pocket in a small business, which is probably a bit hand to mouth. However, it turned out there was a typo, and I'm not really at liberty to tell you what company it was on Jersey, but you would have heard of them. So it was a major Jersey company who was saying they're going to put a % of their profits towards implementation of a national park. And that's because they've been involved in the process, they've bought into the vision, they'd helped develop action, they've begun to realise the influence that they could have and the benefits to them and their interests as well. We ended up with a 20-page prioritised action plan going to all sorts of detail as the stakeholders had determined on all the usual range of activities. We also ended up with the content of the management plan in quite some detail, more than anybody thought we'd get to. And one of the things we factored into the design was the governance. So what is the governance of this new co-production enterprise going to look like? And the stakeholders agreed the 12 types of individual they wanted to be on that group, which included business and tourism and biodiversity and so on. It also included, I think, one person from government and a community leader. So different to the way governance is normally set up for national parks, certainly in the UK. The governance group, so it was clear, the stakeholders agreed who, the types of people, the responsibilities they'd have, how often they need to meet and all sorts of things like that. But setting it up as a legal entity is a challenge. Is it going to be a social enterprise? Is it going to be a cooperative? Normal charity models don't really work. So what is this thing? How is it going to have an entity that can function in a legal sense? And we ended up with this very long directory of offers that people had made. An interim working group was set up because it couldn't go straight from the process of agreeing the management plan into a governance group straight away. So their role was again prescribed by all stakeholders and agreed, which was that it should be the idea that they were delivering. They had to buy into the idea that they were delivering everything as a shared endeavour, so not just there for their own particular organisation or interest, and they had to be responsive and reporting to stakeholders. Now, most management groups aren't recognising the stakeholders as the people they report to. They're reckoning it's a government body or an agency or a partnership project or whatever. It's not the stakeholders they're accountable to, so that was another shift. And they were tasked with things like launch and raising awareness and so on. These were the lessons learned. I'm just time up. Is that time up? Yes. Okay. So, very quickly, the key lessons were the importance of the government letting go. We were totally amazed at the offers that people came up with as definite offers towards implementation. Huge dilemma of an open process. It was so open, people said, well, we can't plan this action until we know what the funds are. And we said, well, that's for you to work out. Yeah, well, what's the governance? Well, that's for you to work out. Well, then what are the priority actions? Well, that's for you to work out. So that degree of openness in the dialogue was both a huge opportunity and a huge challenge for people. I've mentioned how's this new group going to be constituted. There's no models that can be learnt from anywhere else as far as anybody's aware, and I've spoken to some of the leading gurus on co-production in the UK. Very unpredictable workloads in such a dynamic project, trying to do something so new, and it was very exciting with a complete brain ache. Loved going there, and this is my conclusion. It has enormous promise. Let's just shift from tokenistic participation to something that meaningfully shifts the power differences in the government and harnesses all those assets for change.
I think this is where, whether it's small islands or small patches of wetlands, where you can really kind of be tangible and demonstrate new concepts, new approaches that can then be scaled out to larger systems.